Okay, everyone, thank you for being here this evening. I know some of you got out of class late, so I'm expecting there'll be a lot of people hopping on here in the next 5 minutes, but I want to make sure that I'm very sensitive to our very special guest's time. So today we've got with us the fabulous Marcia Elizabeth Christian Favale. Is that good? Did I do a good job?
Very well done.
Awesome. Marcia is just brilliant. First of all, she's a good friend. I was very fortunate to connect with her while I was in Kazakhstan. She's an experienced CEO, an entrepreneur, and a US patented tech inventor of software. She founded Blingby, a new interactive marketing and advertising tech solution. She's been named a top female founder to watch by Tech New York City. She's had an illustrious career in finance as well, investment banking and portfolio management. She's created a restructuring international benchmark for financial institutions. She's also a guest lecturer, private equity, at the Said Business School in Oxford. Marcia's advisory firm was ranked alongside UBS and Lazard. She has a BA from New York University and an Oxford MBA and MSc. She's on a number of corporate boards as well. She is an absolute rock star, and I want to hand it over to Marcia, and Marcia can fill in the blanks because I'm telling you, she's been involved in a lot of things, and she means a lot of things to a lot of people. So please, Marcia, without further ado, I'm handing it over to you.
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction, and thank you so much for your time today. I'm just delighted to be here. I promise that we're going to have an interactive conversation. There are some slides, but it's not death by slides, I assure you. And then hopefully we have a lot of interaction with questions. Because what you're going to see is a career that is unusual in its progression, but kind of makes sense in the concept of entrepreneurship. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. What is the role of entrepreneurship in major programs, in business every day? We tend to look at entrepreneurship as a cool t-shirt and wonderful white sneakers and someone driving a very expensive car. That has nothing to do with being an entrepreneur. We think about tech. We think about people that fit a mold. But an entrepreneur is really a state of mind. So really what I'm going to just impart in my experience is what made my career interesting, why am I important to different people throughout the world in different things, and also show perhaps a path of how someone can be and build themselves to be a master builder. Because one of the things I do at Oxford is give master builder classes, as I'm honored to be considered to be one of them. So I can see some of you on video. Does that sound interesting? Do I get a nod, some participation? Yeah? Okay. So no further ado, I'm going to share the screen, and it's going to be quick. We're going to talk, and then I want to open it up, and I'll tell you my experiences along the way. All right? So once you can see my screen, because I'm a co-host, you let me know, okay? Is it up?
No.
Okay, so let's go do this again. Share screen. Can you see it now?
No.
Okay, so okay, let's start one more time. There you go. Tell me if you can see it now. You have to say yes. This is a yes. Okay, all right. Yes. So in honor of your school, I understand it's Gig'em. So, okay. I won't make the mistake of the other. We won't even think about the other here. So one of the things I want to talk about really is this sense of what it is to be an entrepreneur. Because one of the things I was able to do in my career, and I want you to think about this, is reconstruct a very staid, a very performance-based, a very institutionalized business called restructuring, financial restructuring. So if you can go back in 2009 when the financial sector was crumbling, where you had this liquidity crunch in the world, where a lot of companies and banks, because of that, were struggling, people were surprised that we were able in Kazakhstan, and I'm American, born in New York, that we were in Kazakhstan able to redefine how you do restructurings, to take on the Goldmans, the UBSs, the world leaders, the Wassersteins, the Rothschilds, the Lazard, and say, nah, what we're going to do is better. It's innovative. So one of the things you're going to start seeing from that to becoming an entrepreneur in a tech company, what it really means for you to be an entrepreneur. And the most important thing to begin with is not to think of yourself as an employee. The most important thing, even if you're working for an IBM or on your own, is to think of yourself not as an employee, but as someone that can bring innovation, can create a solution, can organize a group of people, including yourself, and grow and lead. And I'm going to give you an actual example of two different things, from the tech companies to the restructuring. So how can you be an agent in change, and how can you actually identify change? And so one of the very exciting things in the Generation Z and millennials is that I see a lot of them coming to my company and saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, which means I have to come to a startup. No, actually, no. You can actually create that change. And what you're starting to see are people at 40 and 50 actually bringing that attitude within their own organizations. So one of the things you need to understand in this entrepreneur mindset, because again, it's not your t-shirt and your blazer and the cool car, it's how you think. That is something that you bring. That is something that you discover on yourself. That's your authentic voice. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about. So how you're a leader, an innovator, disruptor, and a mentor, that makes you an entrepreneur within a context. So, and when you can take that entrepreneurship mindset and actually create a chain innovation, something that changes the dynamic, well, then you become a master builder. And that's ultimately what people would like to do. So when I think about what are the skill sets of a master builder, what makes you create a mosaic or a masterpiece of an architecture? Now, we talk about this subject and we lecture it even at Oxford about systems engineering. I'm sure this is going to resound with you. So, you know, how do you design and manage successful programs? What are the types of major program risks that you have? Governance, all of these things that seem to be a little bit boring and serious are actually what makes an entrepreneur great. So there's been a lot of disconnects about people saying, you know, an entrepreneur are these people that stay up at late at night or to try to create things. Well, actually, no. Successful entrepreneurs, people that are able to affect change, not just in the startup, but continue that startup to early stage and et cetera, or create that startup within organizations, actually have to master the basic things that you're learning, I'm sure, today in your business school. But one of the things we don't really teach, which doesn't foster, and as you become leaders and as you engage people, as you start touching and mentoring people, is something called psychological safety. So you see, Richard, psychological safety is not actually very well thought of and taught in business schools, and it's not inculcated in culture. And we're going to talk about this in examples. So what in God's name does she mean when she talks about psychological safety? For you to be able to have an entrepreneurial mind and be able to create that role within your organization or create a company on your own, you also have to have an institutionalized culture. And all of this is going to make sense when I give you two real examples. You have to encourage even radical candor. You have to promote an environment of respect. And you have to acknowledge the benefit of sharing. And you have to welcome criticism, but you need to eliminate obnoxious aggression and ruinous empathy, you know, the falseness of empathy or manipulative insecurity. So the idea of psychological safety is actually being taught now in some business schools, and it's actually becoming a fabric in the mosaic of companies to allow for this entrepreneur mindset to come in. But first, it's a personal journey, and then it's a collective journey that you can actually turn on people and make them come to your success, okay? So let's talk about what that really means, okay? I'm actually gonna start with the financial restructuring that we did. So I want you to sit back with me. It's 2009. The financial system is collapsing, if you remember, or if you studied it. All of a sudden, countries and companies and banks couldn't go to the market to refinance. You have restructurings, bankruptcies, liquidations, all occurring simultaneously in the world. IAG, what's happening in Germany, Lehman Brothers, all these different countries. everyone was in a panic. Everyone was concerned. Everyone was following the exact same metrics of performance, which means, for example, a bank has to have a sovereign to come in. In this case, we had the Federal Reserve to come in to save them, pay out investors because we have to be scared of investors, and we have to do it in a certain way. Well, what we did in Kazakhstan, and I want to tell you a story about this, is that I arrived, I got a 3 o'clock in the morning phone call from the governor, the National Bank governor, a gentleman, brilliant, called Gregory Marchenko. And he said, Marcia, given your background in investment banking, and you ran money for Brevin Howard, and you also ran money for Advent Capital, so you've not only placed companies, but you've invested. Could you come? We have a little bit of a problem. So I flew in to Kazakhstan. And then I discovered that their little problem was over $40 billion. So that was over 5% of their GDP. Their biggest banks were falling apart, a liquidity crunch. And all of the foreign investment banks were there because what a lucrative business, right? And they were getting these calls from all of the major hedge funds and pension funds in the United States, all over the world, even government multilaterals. And the prime minister, who I never met, asked me to come in. And he said, I have 3 proposals of how I should go about the financial restructuring, but I've heard you have a different way. You have a different path that's innovative. So what is that path? And I kind of looked at the prime minister and I said, I'm sure you have one proposal that tells you to just use sovereign bonds to pay out people. I said, throw that in the bin. I'm sure you have another one that says that you should create a bad bank and let it all fail. Throw that in the bin. And I'm sure you have another one that says, why don't you blanket guarantee, which means you're going to have to go back to the IMF for money when you just finished paying them off a few years before. I said, throw that completely out. Now I want you to go back. This is a woman in her 30s, mid-30s, coming back and telling Kazakhstan, a prime minister, not to listen to Goldman Sachs, not to listen to JP Morgan, not to listen to all the threatening phone calls from the Chancellor of Germany, also Sarkozy, and all these governments that had put a lot of money into the country and saying, you must bail out our investors, you must bail out our pension funds. And I said, it's not good for your country. What you should do is create something, and I showed him a piece of paper that I created called a burden sharing system. And he said, what is that? I said, that's when you bring people as partners in the process. Now, what's going to hurt is that you're actually going to transfer the pain of the restructuring to the investors, not to your people. They're going to get the haircut. They're going to feel the pain. Now, in 2009, that was not heard of. Subsequently to what we did is what Greece did, and it became known as the standard. So this is why I'm sharing this with you, because not only did we create a benchmark, but we create a system of how people look at restructurings. So what was that? It was design and management, because I literally had portfolio managers throwing chairs at the wall in London in White & Case, saying, Marcia, you're one of us. How could you possibly impose a haircut? How could you possibly create this system? So the ability to look and understand a system, and we actually won, we actually imposed, the government didn't put that much taxes into it, and we were able to restructure it. The ability to look at a problem as a master builder, as an entrepreneur, and say, okay, this is how the system works, but this is how we're going to pivot it. And I'm going to use your language to convince you on board, to convince you against even what you think you have the right to require, to be able to have a system engineering around a case and be able to manage that risk. And it's no different than a program risk. It's $40 billion at stake. That is entrepreneurial, because it changed the way restructurings and banks are seen. It became a benchmark at the Paris Club. It is actually a case study sponsored by Oxford, and it is the basis of the second and third restructuring of Greece, for example. So I give a sense of, to be an entrepreneur, you can be an entrepreneur for innovation through process. Change the restructuring process in the world. Change the process of the importance of investors. Now, you may say, well, did the country afterwards suffer in terms of interest rates, in terms of credit risk? Well, no, we were able to keep the investment grade of the country at that crisis, and we were able to actually issue quasi-sovereign bonds at lower rates than before the restructuring, whilst we were doing the restructuring for 18 months. So that's just an example of what innovation process is within an entrepreneurial mind. And I use this just as an incentive that as you're sitting in business school, as you're looking at case studies, as you're looking at a standard that people repeat, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should take this actual time to look at how you can pivot things, how you can change the way normal business is done, and understand that you can actually change the perception internationally if you have that entrepreneur mindset. But to do that, you have to be a master builder. You have to understand what you're changing fully to be able to build that. And what's another interesting thing is about talking about innovation of product. Now, I have never come from the advertising world of marketing. I am not an engineer. So I didn't go to MIT or Stanford. I didn't know how to code, but I created a new tech company that has changed the way in which interactive technologies relate to video, live streaming, and now even podcasts. So the ability to come up with an idea and the ability to govern and bring together a system where your vision is able to be enacted and helping them understand your vision and put things together is the reason why I have a US patent, a Chinese patent as well, and I'm the inventor on the technology. So this is interesting I want to talk about, because sometimes we think that entrepreneurs are people that have to take the whole value chain into their arms and in their hands and create it themselves. No, you don't have to do that. What you do have to do is be a leader with a clear message and a clear vision, and be able to manage the performance of others. And I had engineers around my dining table that said that what I wanted to do was impossible. And why would you recreate the wheel? They didn't know me. Now they do. They've been with me for 5 years. And so with the ability to change a product, innovate upon something, is just as entrepreneurial as launching your tech company. The ability to make that disruption, the ability to create a system engineering around it, where whatever you're weak in, you can bring in stronger talent so that in unison, you can solve an issue, solve a problem, is entrepreneurship. It is an entrepreneurship that lasts because you're able to create a seat for yourself on the table. So one of the things I talk about being an entrepreneur, Richard, is that for you to be an entrepreneur, you should be a master builder. For you to have that mindset of being an entrepreneur, you have to have the mindset of understanding your foundations, understanding what you're going to disrupt, so that you can do it effectively and efficiently. And then you're able to manifest that through execution and implementation. So one of the things I talk about is that even on being on a development bank board where we invest $7 to $8 billion a year, we've created innovation. We've created a different process of how you allocate credit. We're changing, I'm in the leadership of the NSBA, how Congress looks at entrepreneurs, what it is to sponsor them. So I think that when I wanted to talk today about the role of the entrepreneurial mind in major programs in everyday life and in implementation, one of the things I really want to tease out of people here is this idea of what it is to be a leader. And remember, a leader is someone that creates a psychological safety. And for me to convince a prime minister to take on the world and to believe in me, and not at Goldman, not from a Lazard, not from a Rothschild, to believe in me, is a form of leadership, because I created a psychological safety situation, which I knew exactly how they were going to attack us. I love the word no. And I used the power of no and knowing exactly how they thought we were going to fail to create and design a system engineering, to be able to mitigate any possibility of failure. So to be a leader, you create psychological safety and you innovate. And one of the things that sometimes I think people, and I still notice this in many, is this idea about loving risk. The ability internally to manage the difference between risk and recklessness. and understanding and being comfortable with the concept of being completely uncomfortable. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Many times when you go to business schools, when you work, we want to feel like we're secure. We want to feel like we know this, I got this, I know how to model, I know how to forecast, I've done this before. Well, then what's happening is you're making yourself less important. In this fast, dynamic, and moving world, you're making yourself stale. You're making yourself static. Every day when I come into my company, if anyone that works for me says that they feel comfortable, I've got a problem. There's something wrong in what we're doing. So one of the things I think that, I really wanted to bring out in this conversation is this idea about embracing risk without being reckless. And this idea to be an entrepreneur is that you should never be comfortable. Have the absolute comfort in being discomfortable. Be uncomfortable every day. Push yourself to be uncomfortable, because if you're not, your value is diminished. So that is the topical conversation, Richard. So I'm happy to expand or answer more questions. However.
That was excellent. Very, very interesting. And I think a lot of things for people to think about. Look, this is great. I mean, now we've got a lot of time for people to ask questions. I think some are coming in already on chat. Let me just see what Aaliyah asks. So Aaliyah is she's one of our MS Business students. And she says, thank you for speaking with us today. As future business leaders working towards an entrepreneurial mindset, what are other ways we can work towards encouraging an atmosphere of radical candor? Do you have any examples of companies who are great at that, such as Blingby?
So that's an excellent question, actually, Aaliyah. So thank you for it. Yes, I do. I'm going to talk about the restructuring, okay? Because I like the juxtaposition of something so staid and white-laced versus Blingby. For me to be able to convince a prime minister whose political future rested on the success of this restructuring, because remember what he was saying. Angela Merkel would call them and say, how are you not bailing out Ile-de-France? What is this burden sharing? We're one of your top investors as a country into the country. FDI is so important to the country. What in God's name are you doing? And there's a very famous text that I saw where the prime minister shared and said, and who is this Marcia? And why do you listen to her? Okay. So, and I'll, funny enough, I even, for some reason, I'm also in WikiLeaks. So my point here is that to be able to get people to be convinced, the people I'm imposing a 70% haircut on, I have to create a room of radical candor. And how did I do that? I would go to London, which is a meeting place around the world. We would sit into a big conference room. I would have them come in and literally have them just emotionally talk. All these guys around the table, okay? I'm upset with the country and I can't believe this and blah, blah, blah. Let them vent respectfully, but let them vent. Because as they started to vent, Aline, and as they started to show me exactly what were their pressure points, their emotional points, I was able to turn around and say, well, let me explain to you why I don't agree with you, and this is what you said, and this is the truth. Or, for example, one guy threw a chair and said, if there's any fraud because of these banks, the government allowed it. I said, well, actually, thanks for telling me that. Actually, your institution allowed it. Because if you walk into this room, I have all the proof in how you did things from the trading desk that were not quite trade finance. So being able to create an environment where even confrontation is welcome, respectfully, okay? And be able to use that information and then feed it back contextually to them, ended up making these people that got a 70% haircut give interviews to Reuters and to Bloomberg, telling the reporters how much they agreed with this approach after 18 months and thought that this was the only way forward. Because we created this psychological safety where they could expose their ideas, there was facts against it, And then it created a dialogue. And then lastly, within that, I made sure that the investors had to create their own inter-equity dynamics. So then they could capture that psychological safety and talk amongst themselves and then convince each other to agree to our burden sharing. In Blingby, it's different. In Blingby, we talk to developers and engineers and product people, and we all sit around the table once a week. And I said, this is the problem. How do we solve it? What's going wrong? And everyone can have an idea or a view or a direction that they believe makes sense in a change of the technology or even business. And one thing I do say, there are such things as stupid answers and questions. One of the things that doesn't help is when you don't do your homework. So you can only create psychological safety if the members of that are actually willing to understand the subject and the context so that you can have an open dialogue. That's what you can do. Make sure that people that participate understand the importance of it and are prepared for it and are their master builders in their subject matter and are able then to have this candor and have then a fruit, because this only works if something positive comes at the end. Is that gonna make sense, Aaliyah? Is that helpful?
It does. That was great. And it's such an innovative approach. Thank you.
Cheers.
Excellent. Kate Wynn, another one of our MS Business students, asks, do you have any good book recommendations? And thank you for speaking with us.
I do. So, well, first of all, thank you for being on. It's just lovely to talk to people. I do. There's a book called Psychological Safety, A Fearless Organization. And I'll send you I'll send it to you, Richard, a couple titles that people can go
Sure.
back and take a look. I had the pleasure and the honor to listen to a professor. She wrote the book, Fearless Organization, at Harvard. It really underpins the importance of fearless psychological safety in how your organization can be fearless. I don't know if it's in your reading list at Mays, but if not, it should be, and I will send you the title and the author so you can have it. So when it comes to that, I think this is interesting. And I'm gonna bring you to something else that you're gonna think is completely wacky, but I think you should do. Read the masters. Read the masters. Not Welch, okay? Not these people that we know what they're gonna talk about. Go back to the original innovators, people who created the X-ray, Tesla. Look at how they disrupted. Because the entrepreneur mindset is extremely important to understand real innovators, people that really defied logic, Madame Curie, Louis Pasteur. Go back and get acquainted, even Michelangelo. He couldn't paint or all of that, they didn't dissect a body. That tells you about the importance of being a master builder. That a flicker of light could change the way we illuminate and empower ourselves. Sometimes we think it has to be a rocket launched. Maybe sometimes it does. Most of the time, it is the minimum that changes the world's habits and behaviors. So it's very important. I also want you to take a look at another book called Targeted. It just came back from Cambridge Analytica. Okay, one of the women that worked there. Really understand psychops and behavioral science. If you don't understand psychops and behavioral science, which Blingby does do, in anything you're doing today, you're passé already. Are you guys learning behavioral science and psychops in your classes?
I'm not sure if they touch on it or not.
Well,
They should probably touch on it.
this is today's reality. So in anything you do, from, people don't know this, from hedge fund management, we employ psychologists. We have for many years. We take a lot of data. We've been doing it way before Cambridge Analytica or next, who I know. Look into psychops, which is the new way of interacting, because psychops is not just about getting you to buy a new dress or car. It's actually how you talk to team members. See, people are not paying attention. How you micro-target communication, that should be inculcated in your institutions. Does that kind of make sense to you? It's radical, but this is the next iteration of management and leadership.
Wow, very cool. Yeah. I was just thinking the same thing. It reminds me quite a bit of Berkman. I'm sure you're familiar with Berkman. If you really get into the deep, the deep understanding of Berkman. It's quite something how you can use, you know, that to, you know, influence, but also, you know, change, alter your behavior, alter others' behaviors and stuff. It's very, very, very interesting, I think.
So if you study Tesla, Tesla was way ahead of Edison and everyone else. But why did Tesla fail? That's why I'm saying go back to the masters. He failed because he didn't have Edison's marketing. He didn't understand how to position himself. He didn't understand. So when you go back and forth and you look at that, by the way, behavioral science comes from Carl Jung. The archetypes, psychiatry, psychology. We tend to be very myopic. Yeah, everyone can do a model. Guess what? Everyone can do a model, okay? Everyone can do a forecast, but can you think out of the box, and can you make people think out of the box without them even knowing they're doing it, and then convince, like a prime minister, to do something completely radical that could have lost his career? That's psychops. That's behavioral science.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially, you know, just myself knowing, you know, the Kazakh culture, you know, getting people to take a risk, that's, you know.
Against their culture.
Yes, absolutely. They know that, you know, everything's on the line, especially, you know, the lower you go down in an organization. You know, no one wants to stick their neck out. They're all afraid of that, taking that kind of risk.
But in our fortunate, I was also fortunate to pair with quite a visionary, the prime minister at the time, right?
Yes.
And a person who would read Confucius on his desk. So
interesting.
we keep talking, we keep reading. Like someone have said to me, who's your business superhero? I have no business superhero. There are many people that I do admire, but the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, is not to have a superhero, is for you to be the superhero. So no more following like lemmings. We don't have room for that.
I can already see it, Marcia. After this, I'm going to have some of my students are going to be like, okay, you know, does she have any available opportunities? You know, Aaron Buchanan, one of our full-time MBAs, asks, if you're confident in a disruptive idea or method and your company management is not open to your efforts at encouraging radical candor, when do you either accept no or branch out on your own?
So never accept no, but love no. Never accept no. I'm not the type of person you can say no to, okay? I don't like no, but I love hearing it from people. So my friend, Buchanan, poke the bear. Get as much information of why they say no. Literally go home and write it down, put it down, because they're giving you a roadmap. This is what's brilliant. They're giving you a roadmap of how they think you're going to fail, or the roadmap of what you have to overcome when you leave and start your own business. Now you know how to pitch. If you know people's pressure points and their vulnerabilities, oh, we can't do this because. When you come around and start your own business or take that idea to another business, you know how to succeed because they've already told you what their psychological issues are. So you created a psychological safety environment, and for free, they've given you everything you need to know to revert the pitch, to convince psychops again. So in other words, you know, I like to say this, you know, you never see a boxer cry when they get punched, do you? No. Either they get KO'd, right? They fail big, they get KO'd, or they come out swinging, right? Methodically, training, do the same thing. So poke the bear, figure out why they really don't want this to happen, inculcate that culture because it gives you a lot of information, because a lot of times the pitch falls in deaf ears because the people don't understand who they're pitching to and what they're concerned. And that's what I put in to the restructuring. I understood what they were concerned because I had sat at that table. I've managed risk. I understand. I also understand that they were crying because they had already written down and everything they get is a bonus. So understanding exactly those levers makes you a master builder. And when you know that, Buchanan, you're able to then inculcate that in your idea, isolate that risk, acknowledge that risk, put a framework around it, and you're more likely than not able to move that ball a lot faster. Does that kind of make sense?
Excellent. Maybe if it's okay, can you stop sharing the screen and we'll be able to see everybody?
Oh, okay.
Aaliyah has another question for you. And actually, Aaron mentioned, he went back to, he said, perfecting pitch points and learning the primary oppositions of your pitch. Great answer. Thank you. So Aaliyah asks, have you worked with many different high-profile people in your career? What has your experience as a female entrepreneur been, coming from an aspiring female business leader?
Okay. So I've worked with I was raised with wolves. Did anyone see the Wolf on Wall Street? Okay. All right. So I was raised in Wall Street during that era. I think enough said. Okay. I got the tail end of the craziness, but still today you guys wouldn't believe what we had to endure on the trading floor or on business trips. What I noticed working as a woman in investment banking was not so much about the intellectual question of could you do your job well, because there were studies already that women make better salespeople and et cetera, and et cetera. The greatest, I think, discomfort amongst some of the male bodies was the lack of the importance of their networking. Okay, so if you can't go to strip clubs anymore, if you can't go to places that were isolated for men, where a lot of the deals were going, or certain restaurants or out drinking, whatever the nightlife was, and if you had a female team member, then you were going to isolate her, or it didn't look good for her to join. So there was more of that cultural thing, where it wasn't about, does she know the pitch? Was she intelligent? Did she do good forecasting? It wasn't really about that. A lot of it was what we call the boys network. And that boys network gave a lot of people a reinforcement mechanism. Okay, I'm going to give this deal to this person because I like them. Okay, so a lot of that has changed, by the way. A lot of that has changed, where there's been more of a normalization. Okay, but when I worked at some of the hedge funds, you talk about a Me Too movement. You haven't seen anything yet when in finance. That hasn't dropped yet, right? But at the same time, what you did see is that very entrepreneur portfolio manager, like Brevin Howard is no joke. It was the preeminent hedge fund at the time. And my team on the Trifon Nassis were mostly all women portfolio managers that he took on. And it was one of the best performers because he understood that blending in the woman's psyche in trading is very different than the others. So you tend to have a better Sharpe ratio, okay? Because there is a lot of risk, but it's less reckless. So if you meld both at the same time, you get a better diversity and better performance, right? The tech world is investment banking 20 years ago. It's still catching up with the idea of women being able to be in tech, which is even more bizarre because it's more about your vision and everything else. And there is a certain resistance to it, especially when you're an inventor and you didn't go to MIT and you decide, how did you pull this off? You're not supposed to do this. I'm like, I know, but I'm going to, okay? You know, so, but I noticed that as you keep trudging forward, then success attracts success. And then now I can tell you, we're a woman-led company, but 50% of the management is women, and we have women developers and male developers, but we never get someone that says from a guy that I don't want to be part of it. In fact, they do enjoy being it. So remember, there's also some shackles in our own minds, right? You know, women have to be authentic, okay? This is not all men are all bad. That is certainly not true, okay? There's a lot of women who have had success and have walked on very broad shoulders of other women and men who have helped them progress, okay? So I think we have to not be myopic in that way. I think we have to be aware. It's still very different, but we can't have those shackles, okay? And again, it's like bobbing and weaving in boxing. It's gonna come at you, you know, again, what are you gonna do? Cry? Not gonna cry. So you bob, weave, and move on, you know? Or fencing, I used to fence, so you know, you parry and go forward. To some it's more difficult, but I wanna take a veil down. It's not easy for all men either, okay? So we seem to think it's only about women. I've seen a lot of men struggle, maybe because of their religion, maybe because of how much they see their behavior shouldn't be a certain way. and they were isolated and separated. So I think that when we create that psychological safety that I'm talking about, even for people to have a conversation, I think it empowers. And I'm going to give you one example that just happened in Blingby. One of my developers said he has a problem working with women, not because he thinks that women are inferior to men, but he can't say no. And if he can't do a good job, he feels like if he lets a woman down, it's worse than letting a guy down because he doesn't care. So now it's the reverse. So you have to create this psychological safety, saying, okay, well, let's talk about what you consider failure and why do you see that, right? So just be nimble in the interpretation of things. Let's not be, there's so much divisiveness in America today. Don't bring divisiveness in your psyche in the workplace, okay? Is that helpful?
It was, thank you.
Good advice. Aaron Buchanan asks another question. There will be many industries ripe for disruption in the coming years as AI and data analytics continues to increase in importance. But the numbers suggest entrepreneurism has been trending downward. Do you think this will reverse, or will entrepreneurs now reside inside larger companies that have radical candor and access to capital that allow their employee entrepreneurs to prosper?
That's a very good question. And I love the way you dissect it. So let's take the last part. Yes, I think that smart organizations will invest in their talent entrepreneurship internally, as they should, okay? Because, you know, even in banking, or I don't care if you're in oil rigging or whatever, you have to have people that are looking to innovate so you can have a comparative advantage, right? A competitive and comparative economies of scale and scope, okay? But that will be sexy for a little while. But what corporations don't do well is that then they become staid, because this has been tried before, where people start to develop their own advertising, their own technical tools. And then they found out that they spent a lot of money and it was better to bolt on a third party. So what I think you're going to start seeing is third party companies that work independently but funded by institutions becoming more preeminent. Now, let me tell you why standalone entrepreneurs, because I sit in the National Association of Business Advisors Leadership Council that talks to Congress, right? And also the Tech Committee. We are very poor in America in supporting entrepreneurs. The bureaucracy to start a company, you might as well just shoot yourself in the head, quite frankly, okay? So if you don't come with capital, if you don't come with personal capital, it's very difficult to start a real business. And then there's the other area that everyone decided to become an angel investor or a venture capitalist that have no idea how to analyze a company. So these are guys and gals who were successful in buying, securities of major companies and made billions and made hundreds of millions of dollars. And now they're looking at a small company that has an idea. The execution risk and the credit risk and the risk mitigation of buying a company that's on the stock market versus investing in an entrepreneur is completely different. So even private equity could be an angel fund all the way to KKR, okay? Private equity doesn't mean you understand how to value a manager, a founder, an idea. And I think the distortion of the market is that there's a lot put upon entrepreneurs, like, what's your sales revenue? No one's gonna know. What are you gonna be in 5 years? No one knows. What does your model look like? Are you kidding me? I am II ranked #1 in the world as a head of research, and that's institutional investor. I was considered the top emerging market researcher. So I know what it is to value companies. No one knows what their company is gonna be in 5 years. Are you kidding me? That is one of the stupidest questions I've ever heard. You don't ask an entrepreneur that. You ask, what's your vision, and can we help you craft that vision into a revenue source, not what your revenue source is. So I think that there's a misalignment in the money that's available and the aptitude of the investor versus the reality of investing in an entrepreneur. Does that kind of make sense?
Very insightful. Thank you.
Well, I tend to be very frank, by the way, as you can say when I talk. Okay, I hold no punches. So,
like a true New Yorker.
Yeah, there's there's no room for that, right? So
Bree, one of our fabulous marketing staff at the Mays Business School, asks, she says, you spoke about knowing your stuff and how being prepared creates psychological safety. Have you encountered being labeled as an overthinker? How would you deal with that?
oh, I'm going to tell you right now, I tell my daughter every day, twice on Sunday, I'm a complete nerd. I don't have any issues with, I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. I don't know, whatever that is, I am. I just dress well. That's it. Okay. There you go. That's it. Love it. Who cares? They label you. Ooh, boo, 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 boo. Yeah, you got it. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. Yeah, love it.
Awesome.
Okay? Now, don't let because sometimes when people say you're an overthinker, that means you can't put things in action. That's very bad. That's a no-no. Okay? Kick ass, put it in action. Because one of the things that are missing is execution and implementation. So yeah, you're damn right I'm a nerd. Damn right I'm a geek. I own it.
Awesome. Anyone else have any good questions for Marcia? While they think of if they have any other questions, real quickly, Marcia, why don't you just tell us very briefly about your technology? Tell us a little bit about what Blingby does.
Okay, so what Blingby does is gets any video live streaming or podcast and makes it immediately interactive, not in the player box, which is clickable technology, which doesn't even work for podcasts. It really doesn't work with live stream. Our technology, so I created to be agile, works around any players. We're play agnostic. So quite frankly, the Air Force is going to use it. We just won a contract with the Air Force and another one's coming, where they're going to use us for recruiting. HBO uses us for content management. AMCN Networks uses us for e-commerce. The Air Force is using us for recruiting and for onboarding. Financial services are going to be using us because no one wants to read research anymore. So you can have a video. I can be telling you about my views of Kazakhstan and Kazakhstan drop down, what to buy, and more information as you're speaking. It's going to revolutionize investor roadshows. It's going to envision education. We're digital learners. And my technology is immediately portable. When I was pitching to HBO, I got tired of hearing myself speak. So I said, can I just put my code in one of your staging sites? And in 4 minutes, my technology is working on the website. No developers. Agile design, systems engineering, designs, everything you're learning. So why is that important? Because some people go, oh, we've had this before. Actually, you didn't, because if you did, I couldn't get a utility patent on the entire technology from the United States. But the fact that you think behaviorally it was there is great, because in psych ops and behavioral science, that means you're going to adapt to it a lot faster because you always thought you had it. So it took a lot of time for us to design it in that way. And so the ability to touch people digitally in any platform they want, it works on Facebook, on Twitter, and LinkedIn, and Instagram, on messaging, on email, on cable TV, anything you want, to get everything you need to make a decision. Now, the difference is, while we build accessibility, we create self-efficacy, and therefore we drive propensity. That's what Blingby does.
Well, over my head. Bree asks, she asks another question. Have you had any important mentors in your career? How did you foster that relationship?
I actually had amazing supporters. Like the Prime Minister ended up supporting what I was doing, right? National Bank Governor and people that are my advisory board for Blingby. So I would say that when I was growing up on Wall Street, women really didn't have mentors. Okay. Unfortunately, there was a culture of women being against women. It was something really bizarre, and guys were more mentoring the other guys who they thought would be the next, CEOs. But that's fine, because I mentor myself and learn. What I didn't know, I learned, or I listened, and I brought it on board, and I'm a master builder now, and other people aren't, right? But today it's different. People are mentoring. But I'm going to give one word to the wise. Never allow, men and women, never allow mentorship to be your crutch, because then it stops your self-discernment and you stop looking to be your own master builder and or just taking on someone else's. Be authentic. People need authentic voices, insightful, educated, authentic voices. So great to have a mentor. I talk to a lot of people and help them out, but please don't make mentorship of your crutch. I believe in collective genius. And in fact, I just instituted this in the Development Bank of Kazakhstan, Richard, okay? Where all employees were allowed to talk to the chair of the strategy committee by TEDx and everyone else, because I believe from the janitor to the chairman, everyone has genius. The question is, do you give a voice, psychological safety for that to happen? Can't be chaos, right? So one thing about mentorship, do talk to people if you want to go into the industries or certain different place, and do have orientation but I've noticed a lot of people that have mentors become dependent, and you need to learn how to walk on your own 2 feet. So don't use mentors as crutches, okay? No one knows your personal journey better than you. Is that gonna help?
Good advice. Aaliyah asks one more question. How long did it take to cultivate Blingby to where it is right now?
I had the idea in the back of the envelope before I was going to give a macroeconomic class at Oxford. I thought it was the stupidest thing that I had to fly from New York to all the time. And when I was giving a lecture, people were asking me questions and I had to stop and go, and if you look at this link and if you look at this book, why not just have things that pop up and you can interact? I mean, it makes sense. So the idea was in 2014. I raised money at the end of 2015. And since then, I've been creating it until I got the patent, which was in 2018. First quarter, and boom, we went out to the market, and these are the clients that I told you that we've signed up. And I even recreated a different way of doing programmatics, and we are a Media Math creative partner as well. And again, I never came from marketing and advertising. And quite frankly, I don't see Blingby as a marketing advertising. We have to kind of say that, but I don't really believe in it. It's more of an advanced communication tool that can be used in different industries.
Very cool. Well, I think that's the last question on here. So any closing thoughts for all of us, Marcia?
Be sure that as you go through life now and you have this time, that you're taking absolutely every opportunity to question, to challenge, to learn. You have an amazing opportunity today. Please read things outside of your syllabus. Please do, please do. And remember that if you don't have an authentic voice in what you believe in, people see through it immediately. People see authenticity immediately. In fact, I even do an authenticity class for Oxford for women. Be very clear on what you want. Because people in the beginning, even if you're pitching internally in your company, they buy your vision and then your credulity of executing on that. It's up to you to create that value chain. Does that kind of make sense?
Definitely.
Well, this has been fun, Richard.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I'm so thankful that you came on and really grateful for you to share your knowledge with everyone. I think there's a number of them that have seriously taken, and myself included, have taken some really good nuggets from this. And we'll definitely.
Thanks for all the messages on chat, by the way. Thank you. Listen, I'm on LinkedIn, so y'all can, connect. I'm always accessible.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll obviously be in touch, Marcia. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Shelly, thanks for participating in the crowd. We'll see him in a few weeks as well. And
hey,
no,
Shelly,
really.
Hey, Shelly, it's been a long time since we talked when I was in Kazakhstan. So, hi. I'll be sure to let me know when Shelly's speaking. I'm going to be sure to be a guest. I want to be on.
It's going to be in a couple weeks. He's a music producer in Hollywood, and he'll be on in a couple weeks.
I'm not hiding here. I'm on a device without my video working properly, so I'm hiding behind my logo. But Marcia, I typed it in the chat. You are a superhero. You're so inspiring. And I've been following you since the day that we had our first chat. I know you've inspired all these students. You've certainly inspired me and given me so much energy. And I hope that I can, I took some notes to steal from you. Because that's what good producers do. Good producers rip off from other good producers. So,
Well, Shelly, I got nothing but love for you. So I cannot wait for your lecture, your class.
thank you so much.
And thank you. Nothing but love, and it's reciprocal.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Marcia, it's been a real pleasure. I'll be in touch soon. Y'all have a good night. Thank you so
Good night,
much.
everybody.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
Cheers. Have a good one.